Right, so that was my new wood turning lathe in action, this mini wood turning lathe which I've made up out of an old Wolf lathe. These were used with electric drills in the past, probably 60s, 70s, 80s or some era like that. And they're very good little lathes for very small work. And this is the motor that I showed the other day that you can get on eBay. This is the 200 watt, 220 volt motor with the variable speed, and I'll put a link below where you can actually get this one. You can get this for very low cost, and if you have one of these little Wolf lathes or the Black & Decker one you can actually get hold of, you can actually make a lovely little lathe up. And the Black & Decker version of this is very similar. This is the actual headstock from the Wolf one, still got its original label on there. And the drill would go in here and locate under this clamp here on the collar of the drill. And there's a pointed nut at the back here which would go in an indent on the back of the electric drill. And these were very limited in the way that you had to use an electric drill because you only had 1 or 2 speeds. So I haven't done any wood turning for several years now, probably about 10 or 12 years, and this is my first attempt, and I'm going to make this into a fishing priest using brass. So I'll actually fill this with lead here, and then I shall make a nice brass ferrule to go down over the end here and then stain it so that the grain stands out and polish it or whatever. So you can make, this is about the largest size you could actually machine on this one or turn on this one, which is quite adequate for me. I can actually make gaffles, fishing priests, and it's great for making pens. You can get a little kit on Banggood for making fancy looking biro type pens or fountain pens or whatever. And I made the headstock part, this one, out of an old TV bracket or a wall bracket for a TV or a computer monitor or whatever. I can't remember which one it was. And all I had to do is put a piece of angled brass on the back here. You could use a bit of angle iron. And then I worked out the centre height to the tailstock. And I raised the motor up with 3 large washers. First of all, obviously I drilled through for this bar to go through, and I obviously made it lower so that I could actually bring the motor up with packing, which makes it a lot easier to make. So what I like with this one now is that I have full variable speed, and a very high torque. There's a bit of vibration there on the bracket, but I shall sort that out later with a bit of rubber or whatever. So I got this one from my local recycle centre some years ago, and I've had it in stock for a long time. And when I got this motor, I first thought that I was going to use it for a tool post drill, but I've made enough of those now, and I thought, well, this will make a really good variable speed lathe motor. And when I bought it, I was very fortunate because I was able to get all the adapters that actually go with it. I've got this saw bench kit here which goes on the lathe, and this one comes complete with its measure. So I just need the nut and bolt in there to lock that one on, and then I can actually measure the width of whatever I'm sawing. I've got a face plate and obviously the headstock now, which I'm not going to be using. So they're well worth looking out for at car boot sales or recycle centres or even on eBay, and combined with this little motor here, they make a seriously good little lathe. The only thing that I've left to do on this one now is to make up a box for the actual electronic part here. I've just covered over this for safety for now, but I'll make a proper box for this one to go in, plus I'll put a little emergency stop button here. Now, one important point, when I was actually making this one, I did at first make up an adapter to go on the chuck end, so that the chuck would actually screw on it, but that meant that the chuck was another good inch, probably an inch and a half further out. So what I did in the end was, obviously after taking the little drive on there off, there's a little aluminium toothed drive or ring drive on there, pulley. I had to use this one to actually pull it off. I got this one in a car boot sale for £1 and cleaned it up, and that was absolutely ideal for actually pulling that little pulley off, because it was a very tight fit. There's 2 grub screws, take those out, so you might need to use a little puller like this. For the drive for the wood, I just used a piece of metal there, bar. I think it's about 10mm, and put a 6mm thread through that with a point on, which I did on the grinding wheel. And this is just a butterfly nut with a couple of sharpened edges on the edge of the grinder. So that makes a good little drive, very simple and straightforward to make. And then when I put the new chuck on here, in the end, rather than having an adapter, I actually turned the thread out in the chuck. I got exactly the same drill size as the shaft of the motor actually. And if you want to actually drill a chuck out like this, or bore it out to a certain size, you can open them up, put them on a nice piece of silver steel or whatever, something that's ground, lock it onto the bar, and then put it in the jaws and check that it's running true, and then obviously send the drill down a certain distance. And then all I did was put this on with Loctite 638, and it went off nice and solid, and it won't come off again unless obviously I heated that up in some form or another. But there was no need to actually take this off, because this is all that I will use. So I'll just say that with Loctite 638, the only way you can actually release it from something that you've actually glued it onto or sealed it onto is to actually heat the components up. Obviously this is plastic and it would melt all that, but there is a way of actually getting it off if you really needed to, or if you wanted to use your motor for something else. You can actually heat the chuck up. You could even burn it right off. As soon as it's hot enough on the steel inside, it's probably best to actually fire the flame down inside the chuck until you see like vapour coming off the back where the Loctite 638 would be, and then you could actually use a puller to pull it off, or just a screwdriver and push it off. But it will come off if you really needed it to.